To give you some context, I have travelled quite a fair bit in my life. I've been lucky enough, I would say, if you added it up cumulatively, probably about 2 full years of travel out of my 31 years on this planet. Now, technically, 100% of that has been on some kind of budget, because you have to have a lot of money before you can have no budget whatsoever. But maybe 75-80% of it has been low budget or cheap travel, as in I've been pretty much trying to do things as cheaply as I possibly can. So forgive me for my potentially naive optimism. I might at some point eat my words, but it does look like the world may just open up for travel at some point in the near-ish future. And so I thought I would make a video, actually quite a highly requested video over the years, about how to travel more cheaply. Now, before I get into this, I want to make a subtle but quite important distinction. I could obviously make this video and just tell you to choose all the cheap options, right? I could say stay in the cheapest hotels, fly at 3 a.m. in the morning, cheap eats, go to cheap countries, but I think everyone is capable of just choosing the cheapest option. So I'm not sure how much value that would actually bring. And on top of that, not everybody actually wants to, because saving money is for everyone, right? It's inclusive of all budgets, right? So say if you have got £5,000 to spend on a 2-week holiday, well, you'd still prefer to spend like 4,000, wouldn't you? And so whilst I might include some cheap option type tips, and the main focus of this video is going to be enabling you to do what you actually want to do for less money. So that's going to be the focus. Let's just jump into it. All right, so first things first, saving money on your holiday starts actually way before you even think about going on holiday. So if you are doing your weekly shop in Tesco and you're paying for it on a debit card, then you are unfortunately doing it wrong, mate, because there are a lot of credit cards out there that will offer you rewards for spending money on that card, right? And they can range from points that you can redeem for things, store credit, cash back, money off your energy bills, etc, etc. There are a million things, and so you should choose the one that is best for you. Now, personally, since we're talking about travel, I'll tell you about the one that I use, which is the Gold Amex, and you build up points on the Amex and then you can redeem those points for flights or hotels. It does seem, from what I've seen, that you get more for your points by redeeming them for flights. And as this is the one that I have, this is the one I'll talk about. So a few things to mention. Of course, pay the card off every month in full, so you never actually pay any interest charges. For this card in particular, there's an annual fee of £140. However, for the first year, that fee is waived. And so what you should do, if you want to time it right, really is get the card just before you have any large purchases coming in, or when you know you're going to be spending a lot of money, so that you can get the card without paying the annual fee, and then immediately start building up points in it. Usually there are like points bonuses for if you spend a certain amount in the first few months, things like that. So for me, I got the card right before I moved house, because I knew I'd be purchasing a lot of like furnishings and things like that. So I use the card for all that, plus literally all of my everyday spending, or at least everywhere that takes Amex. And that is something that you really have to get used to, just using the card for absolutely everything. It's more of a habit thing, because you're used to paying on your debit card, and so like it does take a little bit of getting used to always like go to that credit card so that you can get the rewards for every single penny, right? Because it all adds up: petrol, food shop, everything. Now you also get points for referring people. So if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, what you're best doing is getting one card between you under one of your names to begin with, building that up for the whole 12 months. Before the 12 months is up, you get the other person to get the card out, get the points for that, redeem those points on the first card, all of your points, right? And then get rid of it so you don't pay the 140 annual fee the following year, and then you switch to using the other person's card. Now, your holiday itself might be a big cost, so you could even book your hotel using the card and then use the points for the flights. Now, just as a side note, as I mentioned earlier, not all places take Amex. For example, as I found out when moving house and doing some home improvements, B&Q don't accept American Express. And so for those places, it's nice to have a backup card, some other kind of rewards card. Even if it's not quite as good a reward scheme, you still should be getting something back for everything you spend. Essentially what I'm saying is just never spend on a debit card if you can help it. Now, obviously the caveat is provided you have the money in your account to clear the balance on that card every month. Now, of course, the more you spend, then the more points or rewards you'll get and the more money you will save. And you might think that you don't really spend enough to make it worthwhile, but really it's free. And you're basically just using a different card for everything. So there's no such thing as worthwhile, really. On top of that, once you start getting used to spending it for all your groceries, everything that you possibly can use that card for, then you'll find that the points build up actually faster than you expect. All right, let's talk about flights. I'm going to run through these pretty quick, point by point. So you're best using Google Flights or Skyscanner. Skyscanner actually does have, I think, a better UI, and also it includes some of the smaller carriers that aren't actually shown on Google Flights, so I would recommend Skyscanner. Now, contrary to contrary to the myth, deleting your cookies doesn't actually enable you to get cheaper flights. So people used to think that these websites would save your searches and then increase flight prices based on that. People have researched this, it doesn't seem to hold true, but if you want to be doubly sure, then by all means delete your cookies or use a private browser, because that only takes a second. Another myth is that booking your flight on a Tuesday will enable you to get the best price, and that was based on the idea that airlines release their sales on a Monday evening. Again, people have researched this, doesn't seem to be true, at least not anymore. It might have been once upon a time, but nowadays there are always flash sales going on. There are even mistake fares, and so the best thing to do to enable you to get the cheapest price is either to keep looking over every day for a full week or longer, or to use the fare alerts on Google Flights or Skyscanner, so you can just put your route in and then get an email whenever the fare hits a certain level or whenever it's on sale. Now, if you're booking multiple tickets, it can sometimes be cheaper to search for those separately. So if I'm booking 2 tickets for me and my girlfriend, I might just search for 1 ticket twice, right? And that's because airlines divide their fares not just into first, business, economy, but way down into all these subsections of different levels, different classes of fares, right? And once one class sells out, they then move the price up to the next one, right? And so if there is only one of the cheapest seats left, but you've searched for 3 tickets, it will give you a price for which there are 3 tickets left, right? So it'll give you 3 in the next class up, whereas you might have been able to get 1 in the lower class and then the next 2 in the higher class, bringing your average cost down. And so it can sometimes be worth searching for all your tickets individually. Now, if you know that far in advance, and the best time to book for international flights is 3 to 6 months out. For domestic flights, it's a little bit less. So you could risk it and leave it right up until about 2 weeks out, because sometimes airlines do have sales just to fill seats when there's a couple of weeks before the flight, but this is pretty rare, few and far between, and so you are taking a big risk if you want to do this. In terms of when you actually fly, again, there isn't really a cheapest day to fly anymore. It used to be early in the week and a Friday would be the most expensive, but you can find routes now and certain dates where a Friday is the cheapest, right? That's not even rare. So the best thing is to just use the monthly searches on Skyscanner or Google Flights and view the prices over the whole course of the month. Now, if you're flexible with dates, then obviously it's an idea to make sure there's no major events going on at your destination. For example, probably don't go Tokyo during the Olympics. That might be expensive. I mean, unless you want to go for the Olympics, then you really have to go during the Olympics. But aside from that, there are sometimes like lesser known events. I don't know, there might be a Lego convention in Dusseldorf that you're not aware of, so like just search it and make sure, and then if you're flexible with dates, then just go at a different time, because it would hike the price up if there's extra demand for flight tickets, hotels, etc, etc. Now, one thing to mention is don't just look at the flight prices on their own, because one date might be the cheapest to fly, but then if you check the accommodation costs, it might actually be more expensive on those days. So just like flights, hotels do also change their prices depending on the date. And so you want to look at the cost of the whole trip, all together, right? And that works vice versa, obviously. Last thing, frequent flyer programs. They're often not really worth it, because obviously it means that you do have to be loyal to that one airline and you're pretty restricted. Now, if you do a particular route then really consistently, and this airline always tends to be the cheapest or among the cheapest, then it might be worth it. But if you're generally talking about traveling, going on holiday, you're going here 1 year, somewhere the next year, then it's not going to be worth it, because it's going to be too restrictive in terms of your options. All right, let's talk accommodation. So just to reiterate, I'm not going to sit here and just tell you to choose the cheapest option. Obviously, I could just say stay in a hostel with 16 other people, right? But saving money should be inclusive of all budgets, shouldn't it? So let's get on with it. First of all, if you typically like to stay at the same hotel, or at least hotels within the same group, then the best rewards and loyalty schemes you can get are usually through booking those hotels directly through their own website. Now, again, as with the flights, this can be a bit restrictive in terms of options, but I think unlike the flights, you might happen to actually like a particular hotel and like staying at that chain wherever you go, right? Whereas with airlines, you don't particularly have the same kind of loyalty, do you? So that's there if that does happen to be you. Now, if you don't have particular loyalty, then you can at least be loyal to the site that you book through, right? And then you can at least get some kind of rewards for your booking. So with booking.com, if you book 2 stays and you make those bookings within a year, then you qualify for a 10%, what they call Genius discount. If you book 5 stays within 2 years, then you qualify for a 10 to 15% discount. You sometimes get free breakfast and you sometimes get a free room upgrade. You don't usually get even more than one of those at the same property, but you usually get one of the 3. Now that's decent, it's better than a kick up the arse, as my dad would say, but I don't think it's quite as good as hotels.com. Their scheme is probably better, a little bit simpler. With them, once you book 10 nights, you get a night free, and the value of that night is the average cost of the 10 you booked. Now, it also seems that the hotels that participate in this scheme on hotels.com seem to be a higher proportion than those that participate in the Genius loyalty scheme on booking.com. So because I prefer booking.com, I sometimes search for my hotels on booking.com and then just book them through hotels.com. All right, a couple of things to say about Airbnb. You can sometimes get a discount if you stay for longer, so always check. If you happen to be staying somewhere for a month or close to a month, you can sometimes get discounts of like 30%. That's quite a lot. So if you're staying somewhere for like 28, 29 days, then just put it up to a full calendar month and there might be a discount applied. Now you can also sometimes get a 10, 15% discount if you stay for a full week. So always check if you're staying close to a week or close to a month, just add an extra night. It might make it cheaper, or it might make it cheap enough to convince you to stay for longer. Now, sometimes the same properties are on Airbnb as are on other sites like booking.com. So always check, because although they typically do tend to be the same price, sometimes the cancellation policy is better on sites like booking.com. So you can pay the same, get the same place, except just have a better cancellation policy. Another site I've used occasionally, especially if you're in a group of people or your family and you want a big house or a villa to stay in, then homeaway.com is a good site to use. Again, some of those properties will also be on Airbnb with comparable prices, but I do generally find that it's easier to find cheaper deals on homeaway.com. Finally, if you like living on the edge, then you could certainly leave your booking till the very last minute and get a cheaper deal that way. Now, let's say your flight arrives into your destination at 8 p.m. What I would be doing personally there is just getting on my phone when I get to the airport, when I actually land, and just booking that first night there and then. Now, even if you're staying somewhere for a week, you might want to book the rest of your accommodation in advance, because you're still not going to get a discount on those nights anyway. But then just to book the first night when you get there, you can get some cheaper deals that way, and that also increases your chances of getting a room upgrade, because if they're not full, then they might as well upgrade you, right? Finally, this is a bit cheeky and it doesn't save you money per se, but if it's your birthday, your anniversary, if there's any occasion whatsoever, then just put it in the notes when you book, because usually you get some like macarons or like free like food in your room and stuff like that. It's nice, mate. There's no reason why not to. I'm not saying make up birthdays and that. I'm just saying if there is something, mention it, because hotels, like especially big hotels, they want to do shit for you. They want to get like good reviews and that, so you might as well take advantage. Now, this last point is personal choice, and it might come under the just choose cheaper options type thing, but obviously booking somewhere with cooking facilities can save you a lot of money. Now, sometimes when I book a hotel, it shows you how much it is if you book with breakfast. Sometimes it can be like 20, 25 quid per person per day for breakfast. I'm thinking like, I would never spend that on breakfast. Do you know what I mean? I want like 3 eggs and a yogurt, mate. And so like typically I don't tend to get breakfast unless it's already included for free or something. And so I like to book somewhere with cooking facilities, and then you just have more options, don't you? You're not always forced into getting 3 meals a day out. Obviously each their own, but just, well, I suppose just do what you want. All right, let's do transport. So just a few points about getting around whilst you're there. The first point maybe should have been in the accommodation segment, but for me, I like to choose accommodation that is in close proximity, at least to some basic amenities, like especially in countries where you can't drink the tap water, you do find yourself going to the shop a lot to get a fresh bottle of water, and like you don't want to be after getting a taxi for things like that. So obviously it's just something to think about. If you check public transport and taxi fees, you have to weigh it all up, because you might pay a premium for a accommodation that is in a location that is closer to things like that. However, if you pay less for one that's further out, you have to factor in those transport costs. Now, as for transport, then public transport is usually your cheapest option, obviously, but not everywhere has particularly efficient or particularly comfortable public transport, and obviously you have to think about how much longer that's going to take you if you have to like wait for a bus and get connecting buses and trains, etc. Certainly worth doing a bit of research into the public transport, because it's not always what you'd expect. Sometimes some of the quote-unquote less developed countries have actually quite good public transport, and some of the what you would call more economically developed countries actually have pretty shocking systems, so it's worth just doing a bit of research before you go. Personally, I'm not into buses, but like I do appreciate a good underground system. So a big one is always research your journey from the airport to your accommodation. So either know what public transport route you're going to take, or have a taxi pre-booked, or at least know what fare you should be paying for a taxi, right? Now usually your accommodation can help you out booking a taxi, and you typically don't tend to get ripped off with that, because your accommodation want to stay in your good books, they want to get a good review off you, don't they? So they don't really like refer you to cowboys. Now if you're staying somewhere like really nice, then your accommodation might only book like super nice taxis, do you know what I mean? You might get this big massive like Mercedes air conditioned like minibus just for like you and your girlfriend, right? Might be a bit overkill, and that might end up costing double what a typical taxi would have cost you and a typical taxi would have done. Now if you don't have something pre-booked, often you can find a price list for the most common routes at the taxi rank for the airport. If not, then either pre-agree a price that you're happy with, or make sure the taxi's on a meter. Basically the only thing to definitely avoid is getting in a taxi and then not knowing how much you're going to pay when they drop you off at your accommodation, because then they can pretty much say whatever they want to say and you pretty much have to pay it. Now I'm not saying everyone's bad natured enough to try and rip you off, but obviously just don't be naive about things. Now often Uber or Lyft are good options, but some countries just don't have them. Some have their own ride hailing app. So for example in Bali there's one called Gojek. It's pretty simple to use, a pretty good app to be fair, and so that can be a good option. Or different countries will have their own, right? So just do a bit of research, make sure you've got the right one, right? Because sometimes that can be a lot more convenient than actually trying to flag down a taxi. Now some don't have that kind of thing whatsoever, because anything like Uber is completely banned, and in which case you will have to get a taxi. If the country does have ride-hailing apps, then a lot of those ride-hailing apps offer like introductory discounts or introductory money off your first ride, etc. So what you can do, if there's a group of you, or even if there's two of you, obviously one of you get it, use that discount, the other one get it, use that discount, and etc. right? Just use all your discounts. Now in some countries, certainly not all, but in some, the cheapest option can just be like getting on the back of a stranger's scooter. Now obviously maybe think twice about it if you're a lone female traveller. Don't get kidnapped and people trafficked or anything like that, but I mean I've done it in a few. I'm pretty confident that no one's going to traffic me. I mean, who knows? I wonder what kind of candidate I am for traffic. Anyway, in a few countries I've done this, a couple of, basically in Cambodia, anyone sat at the side of a road with a scooter will take you anywhere you want, and you can get pretty far for like $1 or $2. So that's definitely cheapest and most convenient, but I mean, then again, you're not getting a helmet, like, so just be ready. So for vehicle rentals, usually you find that prices across different rental places are like pretty consistent. Like the place one end of the road typically ends up costing the same as the place the other end of the road. And so I usually just go with the place that's got the vehicle that I want, or the one with the best reviews on Google or TripAdvisor. Now obviously if you're renting a car, you have to factor in car parking costs. That's something to think about when you're booking your accommodation as well. And so like a scooter or ATV can usually be a much more convenient option, although they're obviously not suitable for longer journeys, and you have to think about like some countries, the roads are pretty lawless, mate. It can be quite a harrowing experience, but it also can be quite fun. So there's also Turo, which is like pretty much the Airbnb for cars. Again, it's not in all countries, it's definitely in North America. I think it's in most of Europe as well now, and so you can use that. It might be cheaper than renting a car from a place like Hertz, etc. In fact, usually Hertz, Europcar, all those kind of places aren't the cheapest places to do it. There's a lot of time there's like actual like smaller local rental companies where you can get it cheaper. I recently rented a Fiat Panda for €25 a day. I was pretty happy about it. Anyway, let's move on. Alright, I'm going to put everything into a general / miscellaneous category, and I'll try not to take too long over this. I'll just rattle through things really quick. So first of all, spending. Now hopefully you have a credit card that you can be spending on, getting rewards or some kind of points or cashback or something for all of your spending. Now however, if you don't have a credit card or you don't want to get one for some strange reason, then just make sure that your debit card isn't one with a bank that is going to charge you for using your card abroad. Now nowadays you can easily get an account that doesn't charge you for using your card abroad, and actually there are some out there that don't even charge you for withdrawing cash abroad. Now I use a Monzo, so you can use that card anywhere and you don't get charged a fee for using it, and the withdrawal limit with no fees is £200. Now I did a quick Google search, actually found that Starling offer an account which doesn't charge you any fees to either use your card or to withdraw money without limit when you are abroad. And so what I'm actually going to do after this video is switch to Starling. I already have a different account with them. Would highly recommend, actually, not an ad, but I think Starling are pretty sick. Like, the app is clean AF, mate. Anyway, let's carry on. Basically, just make sure that your bank isn't charging you to use your card abroad, and if it's charging you to withdraw money abroad, then I mean, just go to a different bank, man. You don't have to be stuck to these high street banks like the top, 5 or whatever, because usually they're the shittest, right? Now, when you do spend on your card, you're usually given the option of paying in the local currency or paying in your home currency. Now, usually people think, oh, but I usually spend in pounds, my account is in pounds, so I'll just choose pounds, right? That's a bad idea, because if you do that, then what you're doing is allowing the merchant to do the conversion for you, and typically you'll get a worse conversion rate than if you just pay in a local currency and then your bank does the conversion for you. So usually then you'll get the MasterCard conversion rate, right, which is better than this random one that you're going to get. And the same goes for withdrawing money from ATMs. So first of all, choose an ATM at a bank and not one, because even ATMs in the UK, some of them charge to withdraw cash, right? So first of all, don't choose that one, right? Choose one at a bank. But then even at the bank, withdraw in the local currency, right? And sometimes they even say, are you sure that you want to do that, right? Because they try and scare you and say, we can't guarantee what rate you can get. You can either get this rate with us, which we can guarantee, guarantee it's shit, or, take a risk, right? And we can't guarantee what rate you get, you just take a risk, like, but 99 times out of 100, that is better, right? Because then your bank is doing the conversion for you. So like in the worst case scenario, you might be with a bank that charges you to withdraw money. You might go to a cash machine that charges you to withdraw the actual ATM, and then you might take the ATM's conversion fee. So you're paying the ATM a fee, you're paying a shit conversion, and then you're paying your bank a fee before you get your money out. This is literally like pissing money up the wall, a complete disaster, right? I've read that just choosing the conversion offered to you sometimes can be as bad as costing you an extra £30 just on a £200 withdrawal, right? That's some crazy shit, mate. I hope I've convinced you not to do that. And most of the time, it's best to do most of your spending on your card. Now, obviously, provided that you're not getting charged to use that card whilst abroad. We've already been through that. However, sometimes you do need to take some money away with you, some cash money away with you, just to maybe pay your taxi from the airport or to make it easier to leave tips and things like that, right? So obviously, just shop around for exchange rate, know what the actual exchange rate is so you're not getting ripped off, check all your banks, check M&S, check your money places, and then exchange as little as you possibly can get by with, and as I say, do most of your spending on your actual card. And I suppose on that note, the final thing to be aware of is the tipping culture in the place that you're going to. So some places there is no tipping culture, some places it's even offensive to leave a tip, right? And some places it's pretty much as close to compulsory as it gets, whilst never being fully obligatory. Some places it is really expected, and that could be like 20% or so. I've literally bought a bottle of water, a 500ml bottle of still water that someone's just passed me from a fridge before in a club in Montreal, and I was told I have to tip. And so obviously that's the kind of thing you want to be aware of, because some places where the tipping can be 20% and it's pretty expected, then obviously that's quite a big thing on top of your usual costs, so you have to factor that stuff in. All right, I think that's it for money saving tips for now. There's probably a million others that I missed, and of course, as I said, I tried to veer away from just telling you to choose the cheapest option, because I really believe that it's better to try and get the most out of our money rather than get the least out of life. Do you know what I mean? So I hope that was helpful. I hope it's managed to save you a few quid, and I hope you do something good with that few quid you save. So thanks for watching. See you later.